Welcome to today's video entitled Creating Certainty in an Uncertain World. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Colin Lawson and I'm the founder here at Equilibrium. In our first video, we talked about how we're all feeling as a result of the COVID crisis and how many of us might be getting stuck and not making the forward momentum, not making the decisions that we really should be doing during this crisis. In the last video, we talked about how we can get unstuck, how we can move out of our comfort zones. And we started off talking about the ultimate success formula, where we want to see things as they are, not better or worse than they are, then see them as we want them to be, and then finally make a plan to get there. We talked about how we still have time and we've still got choices, and it's important to be wise with both. That when we are moving out of our comfort zones, that discomfort is only temporary. It doesn't last very long. And that one of the ways to get out of those is to have great conversations that are started off by asking some great questions. And that hopefully as a result of going through that process, we can have greater confidence and clarity, increase our certainty levels and reduce our uncertainty levels. And today we're going to be concentrating on creating that certainty in what is undoubtedly an uncertain world. And the starting point of that is creating a lifetime cash flow forecast that's designed to forecast your financial life from where we are today all the way through to when you'll meet your maker and take into account of all of the events and things that might take place throughout that time period. Because surely the number one thing we need to be most confident about is that you're not going to run out of money, that you can afford to live the lifestyle that you want, regardless of what happens in the economic situation, regardless of what happens in your individual lifetimes. And so that's what we try and do by generating lifetime cash flow forecasts for all of our clients. Now, the challenge with a lifetime cash flow forecast is that we know that the minute that it's done, it's never going to be 100% accurate, because things have a habit of drifting over time, which is why we always do them every single year for our clients and keep repeating the process. But there are some challenges with them, and the main challenges relate to what we call GIGO. And GIGO stands for garbage in, garbage out. Just one small inputting error at the start, compounded over time, can make a big, big difference to the outcome that we ultimately enjoy. And there are three main elements to GIGO that we see often where mistakes are made in long-term planning. And the first one is longevity. Most of us will actually live far longer than we think that we will. We want to make sure that regardless of how long you live, that you're not going to run out of money before you run out of life. And I'm meeting with an existing client just yesterday, and we were going through their lifetime cash flow forecast, and we projected it forward until 100. And the client turned around to me and said, "There's no way I'm going to live to 100. I said, yes, but there's a chance, a very high statistical chance that one of you might live to 100. And do you want to run the risk of having a plan that goes to a younger age, only to find out that if you do live a successful long life, that you might run the threat of running out of money?" And incidentally, our oldest client that's currently making her own individual decisions is 105 years old at the moment. And it's likely that our clients will live to a greater age than the average due to their socio-economic group. This is a study that was done of life expectancy across various different tram stops across Manchester. And the results I found were fairly shocking. And there's actually from birth a 12-year difference in life expectancy, depending upon whether you're born in Rochdale or whether you're born in Timperley. And unfortunately, moving from Rochdale to Timperley when you're 65 simply doesn't cut it. The second mistake that often people make is in relation to expenditure. And we find that our clients are really good at judging their day-to-day annual expenditure. But what we found from experience is that clients would often come in at their annual review and say, "Oh, we need an ad hoc withdrawal next year. Something unexpected or unforeseen has happened." And we look back and say, well, we made an unexpected ad hoc withdrawal the previous year, and the one before that, and the one before that. And it's clear that these unexpected ad hoc withdrawals should have actually been foreseen. It might be car replacements, it might be family support, it might be house repairs, it might be legal bills for updating wills and powers of attorney. And so what we build into the plan is a sufficient buffer based upon our experience of what those ad hoc expenditures will be, and then a little bit extra on top as well, so that we can be pretty certain that the expenditure levels that we've put in are high enough to meet all of those clients' individual needs going forwards. And then the third one is investment returns, and I'll come on to this as we go through the video today, because how on earth in this uncertain world do we put an investment return into a long-term plan that you can have confidence on, and then use that plan to make all of your decisions about what you spend on yourselves, what you give away to your family, and how you structure your overall risk profile. Once we've done the lifetime cash flow forecast, the second thing we look at when we're making decisions is what we call the 4-factor focus. I think it's a really simple way of analysing any decision that you need to make. So let's imagine that you're considering a very simple switch from Fund A to Fund B. And you start off by looking at costs, and you realise that the new fund is going to be lower cost than the existing fund. You then move on to look at risk, and all the statistical analysis shows that the new fund has so far been lower risk than the old fund. You then look at the return characteristics, not just historically, but also what you expect for that sector going forward. And you realise that the outlook for the returns, the past evidence of returns, indicate that the new fund will do better. And then we look at the planning aspect, and we find a way of holding that new fund in a more tax efficient way, or it just is more tax efficient, perhaps got lower dividends and higher capital gains. So if you're faced with a choice of having something that's lower cost, lower risk, better returns, and it's more tax efficient, and you don't take it up, if you don't go and make that switch, then that would be pretty illogical. And then we have to factor in that occasionally not all 4 will be positive. Occasionally there'll be time periods where one might be negative. It might be that it's worth paying slightly extra more in terms of fees for lower risk, greater return and more tax efficiency. So it's a nice easy way, whether you're making a small decision to do a switch or whether you're actually thinking about a whole change of strategy or appointing a new advisor, to go through these 4 factors and consider their input or their impact can really make it much easier for you to move forward and make decisions. And so I want to go through each of those factors one on one. And when it comes to costs, some things are a cost, they are a drag. And other things can actually be an investment, they can improve things going forward. And I love this quote from John Ruskin, partly because of how old it is and partly because of its logic. And it's part of a much bigger quote that's worth having a read of. But I think if you're going to be looking for somebody to entrust your life savings with, if you're looking for somebody to assist you in your decision making, your life coaching around how you run your money, how you deal with your intergenerational planning, then dealing with somebody who is really, really good at it, who's got years of experience and a great track record, I believe is worth paying for. And unfortunately, if you want to deal with someone who's really good, you don't find those to be cheap. Cheap and good often do not go hand in hand. And another way I like to look at costs is there's this great book called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? So if you're paying for something, will it improve the portfolio? Will it make it go faster? Or will it actually act as a drag on that speed? So an analogy might be the journey is to cross the Atlantic, and you might be one of these unique individuals that has the skills and the physical fitness to actually row across the Atlantic. Not me, that's for sure. If I wanted to get across, I'd invest in an engine. You might want to consider whether you've actually got the right boat for the right conditions. As I'll come on to, the investment world has changed beyond belief as a result of both the credit crunch and as a result of COVID. And because of that change, if your boat is exactly the same as it was before COVID, then the chances are that boat isn't right anymore. It's not fit for the conditions that we find ourselves in. So it's important to review that and make changes as and when necessary. And then even if you've invested in the right engine and the right boat, the problem is, will you actually enjoy the journey? Or is that journey, is that destination that you're heading towards going to make you feel that uncomfortable that you feel sick? Or actually, is it stable enough that you can cope with the journey all the way along the way? And when we think about journeys, we often think about risk, and risk is measurable uncertainty. Measurable uncertainty. We should be able to predict risk with a relative degree of accuracy. Uncertainty, on the other hand, is unmeasurable risk. So let's explore that by looking at the FTSE 100. And what you see on the chart here, the blue bars are the returns from the 1st of January to the 31st of December each calendar year. The pinkish dots are the intra-year decline from the peak in that year to the trough in that year. And if we start off, I think it's 1987, we can see that at some point during the year, the peak to trough decline was 35%, and yet the year finished up 6%. We can look at the following year, I think it's around about 1997, market was down 24% at one point, but finished up 17%. We then have down 17%, finished up 18%, down 24%, finished up 27%. And of course, we have the COVID era, as we're in now, down 34% at the low point, now down 21% as of yesterday. As of today, it'll be down about 19%. No idea what it's going to be down by the time you're watching this video. It'll be interesting to see where that blue bar finishes by the time we get to New Year's Eve of this year. But the real point of the slide is if you kind of draw a line through those pink dots, what you get is an average drop of about 15% each and every year. I think the mean's about 10 to 12%, something like that. And so why are we surprised when that happens? Why is it that when that happens, the newspaper headlines are billions wiped off shares and people go into panic mode and begin to feel uncomfortable? In essence, don't be surprised by the expected. If we know it's going to happen, then we should be able to build up the emotional resilience to be able to deal with it and actually use those drops as a way of taking advantage of market volatility rather than being a victim to it. So let's come back to that lifetime cash flow forecast and expecting returns or predicting returns. And up until very recently, we've had three core portfolios of cautious, balanced and adventurous. And they've all been relatively tightly grouped in terms of a risk profile. And the reason for that is that most of our clients are also very similar in their requirements. We target a return of 6% for cautious, 7% for balanced or 8% for adventurous over rolling 5-year periods. Some will be much higher, some will be much lower than that. But we've recently introduced our global equity portfolio, which is now targeting a 9% return or 7% above inflation. And shortly we'll be launching our defensive fund, which sits at the bottom end of the risk scale and will be targeting a 3% return. But those are just target returns, but hopefully through having that range of 5 funds, we can now blend them together to create the perfect mix for you. And I'll be showing you how we do that in just a second. But knowing your numbers is of critical importance. Not only knowing the target return for your portfolio, but actually looking back historically, and we've got over 150 rolling 5-year periods that we can use in our data set and say, what's been the best 5-year period that you could expect to have, or that you would have experienced, and what gives you an indication as to what you can expect going forwards. What's been the worst 5-year period so that you can know and plan accordingly? And then what's been the average, and how does that average fit in with our targeting returns for those portfolios? And from those, you can then input some of those numbers into that lifetime cash flow forecast in order to have confidence with where you're going forwards. And when we're putting our standard starting number into that lifetime cash flow forecast, we don't use the 5% above inflation as our normal for balanced. We'd use 3% above inflation. We drag it down by 2%. And the reason we do that is that in over 90% of 5-year periods, we've exceeded over 3% above inflation. And so that's the number that we're still confident that clients can use. From that, we then drag the performance bar down. We start to say, okay, what if it's not? What if it's lower? What if it's lower still? And then we give a rating to that stress test, ranging from secure, saying we believe that this is totally robust, you can go out and make decisions based upon it, to comfortable, to at the other end of the scale, to vulnerable. And if clients are vulnerable, we can talk about what are they vulnerable to? Is it living too long? Is it their expenditure? And then we can start to tweak the plan accordingly. We can go back to that ultimate success formula until we get to a position where the clients are comfortable. We can tweak the risk, tweak the expenditure, tweak some of the assumptions. We can look at maybe downsizing later on, but basically we can make sure that you have total confidence and clarity around that plan. And then we talked about the tax planning angles, and of all things, tax makes the boat go slower. It's a drag, it's like towing an anchor behind us. And so we do our very best to micromanage the tax. When it comes to income tax, we want to make sure that we've got the right profile between dividends and growth. We want to make sure that we're utilising both allowances to the full. We'll utilise investment bonds and top slicing, and there's other videos on about exactly how that works. In capital gains tax, we'll make sure that we're utilising not only your allowances, but other people's as well. I've got one family where we're utilising 10 allowances at the moment. They can make £120,000 every year entirely tax-free, just utilising that strategy alone. And then we've got pensions. We need to manage the lifetime allowance for some people. For others, we need to make pension contributions even though they're not working. We can contribute £3,600 all the way up to 75. Do we want to make contributions for grandchildren? Do we want to review children's pensions and make sure that they're getting matched employer contributions? Maybe they can make extra contributions that can give rise to 60% tax relief and sometimes restore child benefit. There's an awful lot that we can do in the pensions arena. And when it comes to even taking out your pensions, should we limit the amount that we take out to reduce income tax and improve the inheritance tax of the portfolio overall? And then you've got inheritance tax. It's our view that our clients should pay nothing. It is a voluntary tax, and we believe that through good planning, through good intergenerational planning, and through working on it year in, year out, then we should be able to get that down to zero, or at the very least, a bearable minimum for all of our clients. And then we've got charitable giving, both in terms of during lifetime and on death, to make sure that it is as tax efficient as it possibly can. And that's all covered in our intergenerational presentation, which you can view on our website. Now, I mentioned before about the fact that have you got the right boat for the right conditions? Interest rates were cut to a temporary low of 0.5% over a decade ago during the credit crunch. We're now at 0.1, and we're expecting interest rates actually to go negative here in the UK for the first time in history. And that has changed the investing landscape totally. We've got property that used to be a great stabiliser in portfolios, and that we don't believe that we can really use anymore, certainly not to the extent that we used to, and it certainly won't have the characteristics that we wanted it to have. Once interest rates hit that low, because there's only so far you can go into negative territory, then I think fixed interest is also going to be very difficult to invest in. And so we've launched Project Phoenix here at Equilibrium, where we've been checking every investment rule that we believe to be true and make sure that it still stands correct for the future. And we're looking back at how we then build portfolios. And it may be that portfolios are more volatile than they have been in order to achieve the target returns that we want to. And so we need to make that volatility our friend and not to be frightened of it or be a victim to it. And the sheer amount of money that has been thrown at the COVID issue is, to use words, unprecedented, doesn't give it justice. I thought the amount of money thrown at it during the credit crunch was huge. These numbers are literally off the charts, and they're just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so the investment world has changed beyond belief. And if your portfolios, if your strategy isn't keeping up, then unfortunately you will get left behind. You'll have the wrong boat for the current conditions. So it's important to have a proper review of where you're at. And one of the things that we're starting to talk to our clients about is what we call liability matching, and how we structure a portfolio and how we help clients to reframe risk in many different ways. So let's say that we've got money that we think that we need over the next 5 years. That we might want to keep in the lowest possible risk we can. We want to keep that in cash and defensive. We might then have a core portfolio sitting beautifully in the middle. And that core portfolio could be money that we need between 5 and 20 years. And will usually be invested in one of our 3 traditional strategies of cautious, balanced or adventurous, depending upon your risk profile. Then if there's money left over, we can then look at investing that in the highest growth element possible. So global equity portfolio, where we're targeting that 7% above inflation returns. So let's have a look at how that would look in a real world example. Let's say we've got a portfolio of 850,000. The client needs £25,000 a year withdrawals, which is circa 3% of the portfolio. So we keep the first 5 years of that expenditure in cash and defensive. 1 year's in cash, 4 years in defensive. We then build the core element into the portfolio. And that is 20 times the income requirement in this example. So with no growth whatsoever, then they'd still have 20 years worth of income in that portion. So in stage 1 and 2, we've allowed for 25 years worth of their expenditure to be in these two risk profiles. And that means that the money that sits on the top, in this case we've said it's the pensions. We decided that from an IHT efficiency we want to leave that till last. And so we can invest that into global equity, and we can tell the client that we don't need to touch that for 25 years. And if you're taking a 25-year view, then where would you invest your money? You wouldn't leave it in cash, that's for sure. You can afford to ride out volatility when you're looking at a 25-year time horizon. We can then also overlay that onto an individual plan. So part of a cash flow forecast is a timeline. And on the timeline, we put different events that we expect to happen at different time periods. And so we can allocate the risk accordingly. So between the liability matching and the matching of the plans, what we have is a very tailored portfolio where we can literally label not only money on a time period, but also a purpose. So it may be that you have money that's 2035 grandchildren's property deposits. And clearly that's logical, because the shorter the time frame, the less likelihood or the greater the risk of volatility. Client review that I did yesterday, client wants to take out £50,000 over the next 12 months to help their son on the property ladder. And we wouldn't want to keep that in the FTSE, because we know that over 12 months the worst return's been minus 34 and the best has been plus 52. That's an unacceptable risk. Once we get to 10 years, the risk is minimal. Once we get to 20 years, we've only ever had positive outcomes as a result of investing in the equity market. So by making sure that we've got the right risk profile for the right portion of money over the right timescale, we can do things very, very differently, and we'll come on to that as well in the final video. Another way that we can create certainty is through our communications. We believe that when you enter a crisis, you cannot over-communicate. And so we put out 8 videos in the first 7 days of COVID. These are on a variety of different topics, some based upon the economic outlook, some based upon the investment outlook, and some like human doings that are just based upon how we're all feeling and how it's affecting our biases and actions. We've had, I think it's 11 different live streams so far, probably be more than that by the time you're watching this video, but it gives you some idea of the way that we've tried to communicate with our clients and prospects. And then for those that prefer the written print, then we've got plenty of newsletters, we've got blogs, and Equinox will either shortly be landing through your doorstep or already has done. And within Equinox, you've got all of the stats around all of our portfolio performances, all the individual sectors, all the individual funds, all the costs on the portfolio, along with what are also a lot of useful articles we hope to help your knowledge and to help develop your thinking going forwards. And the reason why we do all of that is to help meet some of those human needs that we talked about in the first video. Those initial videos hopefully improved people's certainty by giving them more knowledge and reduced their uncertainty. Hopefully the live stream events and the videos that we do like this help improve the level of connection that we have with our clients. And hopefully the level of knowledge and the concepts that we share as well help with the growth and learning going forwards. So we're always thinking of ways that we as a business can help to meet our clients' human needs, how we can help to make their lives better. So in the final video, we're going to bring it all together. We're going to be looking at reasons to be proactive, why it's actually really important that you do focus on things now, you do start to make some changes now. And we're going to be talking about some specific actions that you can take, not only on an investment level, but also just within your overall financial thought process. Because after all, it's only action that actually changes anything. So I hope that you enjoyed today's videos. I hope that you've enjoyed the earlier ones. As always, I would be delighted to take your questions, so do please get in touch. It's always great to hear your feedback. about how we can improve, about the things that you like within the videos. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.